Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you for everyone for being here. And today I hope to share a little bit about what I do with hair analysis. It's my passion. I love it. I'm looking for heavy metal toxicity. And I'll just share with you a little bit about my view from nutritional standpoint. I'm curious about how others measure their clients' gains. You know, how do you know that what you're doing with them is really working? And what I love about the hair analysis is it's scientific, so I can see actual proof. I know if it's working because when they retest, I can see what's happened biochemically and what's changed. Um, with the hair analysis, I try to equate with my clients or new people. This is how I look at it. Your blood is like your checking account. So it has to stabilize and regulate to keep you healthy, whereas your cellular storage is like your savings account. So you want to make sure that your savings is full and it's happy so that it can draw a lot out of the checking, and your blood can regulate. At one point, I was really fatigued. I had 4 small children to take care of, and I had started to have some heart palpitations. I was at the point of fatigue where I could only stay awake for about 6 hours a day. I would purposely stand because if I sat in a kitchen chair just like this, I would fall asleep. I was just unable to stay awake and take care of my kids. So I went to the medical community, which is how I was raised. You know, we thought doctors knew everything. Some are brilliant and very much needed, but the ones that I went to couldn't figure out what was going on. So they passed me off to a cardiologist, and I went through a gamut of really kind of dangerous testing, and they couldn't find anything. So they dismissed me. It made me angry, and I had to figure out what was going on because I knew that I was dying inside, which is a crazy feeling I hope nobody feels. Um, so I went in search of an answer, and I found a lady that did hair analysis, and she looked at my chemistry, and she actually had her daughter drive me supplements to my house on Christmas Eve, which is a holiday. And I thought, oh, I must really be dying here. Anyhow, it ended up I had a sodium and potassium deficiency so severely in my storage or my cellular health that I couldn't regulate my heart. And that's why I was having the palpitations and extreme fatigue. About 2 weeks into my protocol, my husband actually called her and said, "Thank you for giving me back my wife," because I was so checked out and wiped out. So my mission is to help people figure out the why, what's going on, and not dismiss the symptoms that maybe, you know, a doctor has says, well, you know, maybe you need this, and it masks their symptoms. There's a reason, and I'm looking for that. What am I looking for in a hair analysis? I look at their mineral levels. So their electrolytes, which is a big deal, of course. And I'm looking for heavy metal toxicity, oxidation rate, if they're a slow or fast metabolism, where their cellular glucose is. So different than the blood sugar, I'm looking at how much is stored up in their cell. If we have a Snickers bar or a sugary treat and we take a blood test, we can look diabetic. But at the cellular level, are we too low or too high? And that's where I try to help regulate people with their blood sugars. Their bone and their health of their teeth are on there, and their muscles. I can look at their phosphorus levels and say, are you catabolizing or are you tearing down muscle for energy? And then advise them on how much protein to increase. I do work with vegetarians, which can be a little more tricky because they tend to be more copper toxic. And I can answer questions on that later. But let me explain some of the basics. So I just kind of picked out one of my electrolytes and my minerals on my test. The calcium level, if it's high, someone can be in a calcium shell. So the outer portion of their cell gets hardened like an egg, I kind of equate that to, or they can have a lot of storage in their tissues, their bones, arthritis. It deposits in the brain and the kidney. It's linked to cancer, having a high calcium. We all know about, you know, arteriosclerosis in the heart. They have a slow metabolism, insomnia and irritability. They have insulin resistance. So they're on their way to diabetes. So I can kind of pick up on trends on what's coming down the pipeline before it actually happens and try and turn it around before they have an issue or a diagnosis. I don't diagnose. However, if they do have a diagnosis, our goal is to help them get off of a medication or at least lessen medications and improve their health from the bottom up. Some of the folks that have a high calcium can kind of tend to seem spacey or kind of checked out. I have had a couple instances of schizophrenia that had very high calcium as well as copper toxicity. And once we were able to kind of melt that shell around the cell to get more oxygen and nutrition in there and start to detox the heavy metals, the symptoms dissipated. In one case, I had a boy that was very violent, and we corrected the imbalances, and he didn't hear that high pitched, he said, kind of girl cartoon voice that was causing him to behave in that manner. With a low calcium, obviously muscle cramps are related to that, insomnia, aggressiveness, severe allergies, heart palpitations, anxiety, panic attacks, because they're unable to calm themselves. The calcium and the magnesium and the zinc are calming minerals, so we need to have enough for fight or flight. Hopefully they're not stuck in that one. Their thyroid tends to be fast, so just the imbalance of one mineral can throw off so many different things, and often the symptoms overlap. So what I'm trying to do is balance all of those minerals together, kind of like a baby mobile. If you hit one of those, the whole thing teeters. So you try and cover everything at the same time gently and supply the body the tools that it needs to correct and fix and detox. The things that I'm looking for also, the most important thing is the sodium to potassium ratio. And that's where my problem was. If it's high, they tend to be a fast oxidizer or metabolizer, and they have greater permeability of their cell, which means this virus that we're all fighting with in the world and colds, flus can get into their cells and tear them up and kill them easily. If they have this high sodium potassium, they also have a low calcium and magnesium often, so they're not able to calm. The slow oxidizers have more acidity because they're unable to use their calcium to take down that lactic acid, and they have a lower omega fatty acid that surrounds that cell membrane, so we need to build that up. They have bowel toxicity. They're not eliminating normally, so that tends to reabsorb and make them ill again. And metal toxicity climbs up there. They have a higher rate of infections, less bioavailable calcium, and they're just not able to neutralize and take that pH level where it needs to be. The Na to K also, that ratio indicates where their inflammation is, like a C-reactive protein or CRP on a blood test. So I can tell where their inflammation is in the cellular level. It's really crabby. And we call it the life-death ratio or life vitality. So we can really gauge right away where somebody's at and if we need to build it up or if we need to take it down. I do use supplementation to really give them the load of nutrition that they're depleted in, and also to help their body have the tools to remove the toxins that's not been able to do because of the nutritional deficiency. And that's where I love my tests, so I can tell exactly where they're at, what they need to do, and then retest and see what's happened. Because the second half of what I'm working with is the detoxification. I can fill them with nutrition all day long, but they need to take the trash out the other side, and they need to get rid of the toxins and all the built up things that are causing a lot of the symptoms. So I work with the heavy metals, also chemical exposure. They could have eaten a lot of foods that are sprayed with glyphosate, which is really prevalent here in the US, and that tears up the gut and causes leaky gut. And so we need to remove that chemical that is stuck and sticky between the villi and the system in the gut, and clean house and get that out of there so they're able to digest. They don't have the symptoms. They're not toxic. It doesn't affect them mentally. And then the other thing with detox that I like to hit that is under addressed a lot is parasites. It sounds kind of gross and everybody thinks we don't have them, but we all do. And I say to new clients, if you've had a dog lick your face, you've had any kind of pork or fish, you've walked on the ground with bare feet, we're just exposed every day. Raw vegetables have little eggs on them. If you ever garden, you can see things like that. If they're not cleaning them properly or they go out to eat, we're all exposed. So it's just a wonderful thing to assume they're there. I would say 60% of my clients call me within a few weeks and say, oh my gosh, you'll never guess what came out. So I help identify what's going on, what it is, and kind of calm them and say, you know what's better out than in. Let's just take care of it. And it's a good thing. Now the parasites aren't taking their blood supply, causing iron deficiencies, stealing their nutrition first, blocking up gallbladders. I've seen even the giardia that can block up the gallbladder, and Lyme infection. Always, I see the parasites with the Lyme infection. And it's hard to get under control because when they're on these antibiotics, the bacteria likes to hide within the parasites. And then once they're off of the antibiotics, it comes back out and they have a reinfection, so-called. So once we kill off their hiding spot, they aren't going to have that reinfection again, and just clean it up. When the parasites die, there's detox symptoms. So they feel really cruddy. They have to reabsorb these parasites. And the only benefit that they give whatsoever is they will retain heavy metals within their little bodies. So the sooner we can get them out, the better. If I can, I like to get them out with natural products that kind of paralyze them. So they come out and we don't have to have the die-off symptoms and try to reabsorb and get rid of what's left over. With the heavy metals, that's where it gets real interesting because it affects us mentally, physically, and emotionally. Mentally, it can give us brain fog and memory issues, anxiety and depression, schizophrenia, as I mentioned. ADHD is a really big one that I see with children and even adults. They have the heavy metal toxicity along with the parasitic infection. And when you take those factors out, it's like you turn the light switch on. It's amazing. So those are the ways that it can affect us mentally. Physically, it's all over the board. It's headaches, inflammation, rashes, fatigue, diabetes. Everything is linked to heavy metals in some way. And what I like to do is kind of play detective and figure out what are they experiencing right now, because they'll call me or they'll email and say, oh, I have this thing going on. I ask them, have you had this happen before? Many times I'll have clients that are detoxing built up calcium and it's in an injury. And they're like, oh, my knee hurts really bad. And I don't know what I did. I don't think I did anything. And they don't remember, oh yeah, they hurt it 20 years ago and it healed. But the body will go back and clean up and give them Herxheimer symptoms while it's doing so for a few days. And I try to help them get through that so they don't give up or stop taking supplements and detoxifying, to just get them through it and past it for good and clean that up. Emotionally, it affects us with fears, mood swings, nightmares, and the psychotic disorders. They trigger our behaviors, and that's not understood well sometimes. So for instance, I had a client that had a really high iron level, and I said, you know, you must kind of want to rip people's faces off some days because I've never seen anything this high before. And he says, yeah, I do. I can't believe you know that. But his iron was so high, he was angry and agitated. And he said, you know, I don't mean to be, and this isn't how I normally am. It's not my nature. I don't know why I do the things I do. But these heavy metals were agitating and aggravating. So we had to get that out for him to feel like himself. And it happened. It happens all the time. Copper toxicity, I say, is my most prevalent one because of use of birth controls, antibiotics. It's found a lot of times in pool chemicals if someone swims a lot or they have a hot tub, in copper water pipes. A lot of folks have those refrigerators with the filters in them, but that water can sit in that copper water pipe before it gets into the plastic filter in the refrigerator for 12 to 24 hours until someone pushes that button to get water out of there, and it can absorb. I've had clients that have had fluke accidents where their electrical actually made contact with the copper water pipe and it leached into her water, and their whole family became toxic to the point where it was coming out on their clothes. So if you ever have seen copper that's aged, it's green. She was a dancer and wore a pink leotard, and wherever she would sweat, it would turn green and oxidize. It was extreme, but it just shows us, our body's trying so hard to dump all of these things that are making us sick. We just need to give it the tools that it needs. The last thing that I look at on hair analysis, which is where I really nerd out and I like this, is hair patterns. So oftentimes we can see where the levels are and see patterns of where they're at, showing us, for instance, sympathetic dominance. Are they on fight or flight all the time? Adrenal burnout. I can quantify how far in the weeds they are with adrenal burnout and what they really need to do to correct it and let that heal up and stop that fight or flight. Aggressiveness and trauma. We can see past trauma show up on the hair analysis and say, you're going to go through this and you're going to have to deal with it. I've had people in their 30s and 40s come back to me and say, now that I'm detoxing, I just realized I was molested as a child. And that's a big deal. It's really hard. They've blocked it. They've had calcium shells and they've had great self-defense mechanisms physically to protect themselves, but it comes to light when we're healing and emotional trauma pops up. There are people that are energy vampires, and I know that sounds a little woo-woo to some, but they literally will steal in their behaviors and their chemistry energy from others. And then there's the energy victims. There's a pattern for that, and workaholics. So it's really interesting to me, and I can point little things out to them with their personality and not really know them well. And they're like amazed. They're like, how do you know that? It shows up in our chemistry. We're driven by our chemistry. So that's just a small peek into my world. And some of the main clients that I work with, like I had mentioned and was on that little introduction, thank you, Benjamin, is people that are looking for a root cause. They want some scientific proof on what's really going on, but they want a natural way to heal their body and allow their body to do what it can do. They're just lacking the tools and not knowing exactly what they need. When I had the doctors guessing and I call guinea pigging on me, I wasn't too happy, and I didn't want to take medications to mask it and then give me another symptom. So I really want to figure out what's going on for them. In business, the people that I'm working with are chiropractors, neurologists, because they see the benefits of identifying what heavy metals are interfering with the mind. Some MLMs, like I have a couple of clients that are on isogenics and they want to see if it's really working because it is a generalized product. They want to know that this is cleaning house or this is helping. And nutritionist. There's other nutritionists that want to know what supplements are right. They might have dialed in their diet already with their client, but they really want to know how to supplement correctly. And for instance, zinc. Zinc is one of those things that will thin your cell membrane. So if someone comes to me and it's really thick and it's hard for oxygen and nutrition to get in there, we need to thin that wall out. So right now I'm starting to see a lot of people come to me with zinc toxicity because they're self-medicating, thinking it's going to help them with COVID. And they're depleting that membrane. So now it's ghostly and viruses can attack and kill their cells. So I'm giving them supplements to beef that up and build that cell membrane back up. So that's basically what I'm doing over here. I am so thankful and honored to have you with me and to listen. And if you want to get a hold of me, I'm at hairanalysisnutrition.com, pretty easy, or Lisa at hairanalysis.com, hairanalysisnutrition.com. And I look forward to learning from all of you too. This is wonderful. And I thank you again.